All right, Friday edition of Saving the Republic with Joe Staten, presented by Grab Your Gear Network, is here. As always, we are joined today by our good friend Mark Rogers from the Voice of College Football YouTube channel and network with many different channels. You want to check it out. The best college football coverage out there, in my opinion, from what I've seen. I thoroughly enjoy watching the Michigan channel. TJ does a good job over there, so make sure you check it out. But today we're going to get into a couple stories, mainly the January 6th news coming from the FBI that there was 26 informants in the crowd that day. And secondly, the FDA is interestingly considering a ban of dangerous food dyes, which is interesting timing. So we're going to get into that and more in this episode of Saving the Republic.
Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which they must not advance.
Indeed, there is a point beyond which the Marxists and communists must not advance, right, Mark? So I think that goes perfectly with the first story, President Reagan's speech, which is why I kind of, I first of all, I love that for many reasons, but use that in the intro. But I guess, first of all, how was your week, Mark? How are you doing?
Things are good. Winding down for the end of the year and putting together some holiday plans, as most of us are. But things are good, and we're in the middle of college football playoffs for the first time ever of a 12-team variety.
Yeah, very, very exciting times. I know the Ohio State faithful is excited for this game against Tennessee, and a lot of very cool matchups happening. And I mean, hey, we hear that I've heard from several sources, including people from around Ward Manuel, which is the chair of the college football committee, that this could be easily expanding in the next coming years to 14 or 16 teams. I don't know if you've heard similar things, but that's what I've been hearing. But yeah, very, very exciting times at this time of year for sure. And also a beautiful holiday season. I mean, the Advent season, the Christmas season is something that, we as Americans, we cherish, right? We love it. And I know I personally love it. I'm currently actually in Thailand, though. I've told you this, Mark. It's an interesting way to spend the holiday season, but still trying to enjoy the traditions. And my favorite movie is Charlie Brown Christmas, so we've watched that, my wife and I don't know. Maybe that's a good question as well. What's your favorite Christmas movie for this season?
My daughter just texted me the other day to remind me that she was watching Christmas with the Cranks because that had been something that I would not in any way want to say that that's a all-time favorite of mine, but we seem to at some point during the kids growing up that just kind of hit a sweet spot in terms of those movies being released at the time. But the animated ones, the only one that I've caught this Christmas season has been Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So the ones that go back to the 1960s and the early 70s are right in my ballpark. Frosty the Snowman and all of those.
Yeah. Those were absolute classics in my house. My dad played those for us, and I mean, some of my earliest memories of Christmas, I actually remember when I was like 4 years old, which is probably my earliest memory of Christmas. But we would watch those movies, and it's just maybe it's the nostalgia with those movies, right? I don't know if you watched those when you were a kid, but that's what kind of triggers that for me. And that's also the same reason that, Charlie Brown Christmas is special for me. I used to get my dad got me like a Schultz, Peanuts book with all these different drawings. And when I was a kid, I used to draw the Peanuts characters. So I love that movie. But again, a great season, and something we all should take a moment to appreciate, and just make sure you appreciate your loved ones this season and spend time with them. And I guess try not to get too tied up in the political news. Sometimes things can get overwhelming and people want to escape from reality and use that holiday as a reason to do so. And understandably so. But if you're watching this show hopefully, is so that you don't get overwhelmed by the news and that you can feel like a sense of you can grasp why these stories matter and why the news matters to your life. And that's what we do here at Saving the Republic. Um, and so the first story, Mark, we can just kind of open this up for general thoughts. But, there was a report that came out. First of all, the FBI director, Christopher Wray, resigned, which is news in itself. I'm sure he sees the writing on the wall with President Trump not wanting to get fired, I guess, by him. And the day after he resigned, though, it was just strange, very strange timing to me. And I'm gonna put a tweet up on the screen here, if I can pull this up, from Greg Price. But essentially, there were 26 informants, confidential human sources at the Capitol on January 6th, including 4 who entered the Capitol building and 13 who entered the restricted area around the Capitol, according to a released DOJ Inspector General report. And so Mark, the first question is like, why? Like, why would the government need to have informants in this crowd? That's the first question that comes to my mind.
Well, there's no honest answer to that question. There's no understandable, based on what we expect that the FBI to be fulfilling as their purpose. There's no reason for them to be in that
It's
crowd.
almost like they were anticipating a violent insurrection that was partially started or inspired by some of these informants, right? I mean, it's have you ever seen the videos of Ray Epps, Mark?
I don't know if I've seen those specific videos. I just think that we've collected enough information and heard enough eyewitness testimonies to know that that was not a full throttle, just Trump initiated, not even taking him into it, but Trump supporters initiating any kind of raid on the Capitol and a coup attempt, and all of that is ridiculous. Just people that are unarmed, taking over a government building, the size of this country. Just the utter ridiculous aspect of that, and the way this has been framed. And
Yeah,
now we
doesn't it make
continue to
you
find out more and more.
doesn't it make you wonder as a citizen, when the news has painted this as a legitimate attempt to overthrow American democracy? Doesn't it make you wonder, like, well, if that's an actual attempt, I mean, what would it look like if somebody actually tried to overthrow the government? That's what I've wondered, right? Because yeah, the scenes that I saw on that day, like, let's be objective here and say this, right? We should not have people entering the Capitol building if it was restricted. We should not have people interrupting that process of certifying the vote out of respect for the process, out of respect for our institutions. But at the same time, when the police officers at the front doors are opening the doors and they're guiding people through the hallways, I don't think that, first of all, those police officers' lives were at danger that we've heard. We've heard, again, and these are from like CNN, the dying legacy media outlets that are clearly partisan and biased. But we heard from them that, again, this was a legitimate attempt to overthrow democracy, but also that the police officers' lives were at stake, that these people were threatening people. And hey, we've seen clips of a few people that were getting out of hand. Of course, you're going to have a massive crowd. You're going to have people getting out of hand. But the vast majority of people were peacefully walking through this hallway. So, Mark, again, if this was a legitimate attempt to overthrow democracy, what do you picture that, what do you see that would be an actual attempt? What would that look like to you? Because to me, this doesn't seem like that.
So it's the largest, most powerful military and government force in human history. And what it would take to overthrow the government, to consider this to be a legitimate threat to democracy and to the government, is utterly ridiculous. Not that any loons out there shouldn't be taken seriously in what they could possibly pull off in regards to harming people. But again, unarmed people being allowed to invade the Capitol building, though it was a disconcerting view of what happened that day, and none of us wanted to see it go down that way. Yeah, and to your point that there was enough anger and so forth over the result of that election that yeah, that needed to be protected. That process, that transition of power needed to be protected, and obviously it was. And I find the thing just utterly despicable that we have people that are rotting in prison right now, and hopefully President Trump will, review those cases. And I saw
Oh
somebody
yeah.
grilled just the other day concerning that and whether he was going to give this blanket pardon or whether he was going to be reviewing each individual case, which he, of course, he should. Because I can't speak to whether there were certain individuals who should be uh, prosecuted and held for a longer jail time. But certainly the vast majority, I don't believe so.
Yeah, there was a specific case. I forget the name of this woman, but she was like in her 80s, right? And she was just there that day and didn't do anything violent, didn't do anything except really walk in the hallways that were again opened by police officers. And this woman is in prison and she's in her 80s. And it's again, this is somebody who's, you're in your 80s. The reality is that you don't have much time left, right? And you're having to spend the rest of your days that should be spent with family in prison for something so ridiculous. And look, this was obviously an attempt to scare and to threaten people, right? They use this as an opportunity to say, hey, you guys are never gonna. You tried to protest this election. You're never going to be able to actually overthrow the election because we're going to put everybody in prison to make an example out of everybody and to scare you away. And we actually saw, now that we're talking about this, I remember seeing Merrick Garland talking before this recent election and saying, yeah, if anybody wants to question the results this time, we're going to be ready to go preemptively. We're going to be looking for people to stop them from even questioning the election. So, you know, and I'm going to throw it to you, Mark, but this actually makes me wonder, and I'm put on the screen, but can we have a conversation now about the 2020 election? Because I don't know if you've seen the policies, but YouTube for a while wouldn't even let you talk about the 2020 election. Now they do. Now you can question some things about the 2020 election. So, Mark, can we have this conversation now?
Well, one of the worst things that resulted from January 6th, obviously, was not the overthrow of a government or anything close to that being legitimately in play. It was that became that incident, and the false reporting of that incident became a weapon, became a political weapon for the left for the next 4 years. And at one point, I was concerned that was a topic that was almost very difficult to defend. And President Trump, for his debate skills, never I thought really handled that topic very well, and a lot of people didn't. And I can't say that I would have either, because it starts with the premise that you already have two strikes against you, and to try to argue yourself out of this incident that has been so largely framed incorrectly has been a difficult political weapon to overcome for the right. And it's pretty amazing that with all the mainstream media framing of this incident, this day, that that was overcome, and enough people had enough sense to realize that there was more to it than simply MAGA supporters do not respect the election process and refuse to accept defeat.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that about the debates because my wife and I both were watching the debates and we had the same takeaway was that President Trump's weak spot, I think, politically was January 6th because,
Yeah.
as we all know about him, he just would refuse to acknowledge any sort of negativity that was associated with that event. Which, look, there was some negativity, right? We've already said that, but I also understand from his perspective because if you followed that day, which I did on Twitter, if you followed the president's actions, you would have seen that he put out a statement saying peacefully and patriotically protest. This was before the Capitol. You would have seen that he put out a video on Twitter telling his supporters to go home. And you know what Twitter did with that video? They banned him. They took him down and they banned his they banned him when he's saying to go home. So how can you blame the president when Twitter is preventing the message from getting out? I mean, that was like, wow. That seemed to me like it's almost like Twitter was trying to, build this narrative that we're not going to let him actually say what he believes. We're going to paint him as wanting this to happen, which was crazy to me, And so, another question that I think is worth discussing is look, if Kash Patel is going to be the new FBI director, we've already seen what he said on the FBI. He says, let's turn the Hoover building into a museum of the deep state, right? Let's hang up all this evidence of the times that the government has lied to you. And I think our government could use a cleanse. I don't know if you agree, Mark, but like it reminds me of when Elon Musk bought Twitter and he exposed the Twitter files. And what that did is that the public regained trust in Twitter because they knew that they aired out all the dirty laundry. So now it's all out there. So for example, if the FBI came out and said, look, yeah, in 1963, the U.S. government actually did have a hand in the killing of John F. Kennedy. In 2014, the U.S. government had a hand in the overthrow of the Ukrainian government to install a tyrannical regime. If they said, God forbid, if they said, yeah, there was some fraud in the 2020 election, holy cow. I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine if the U.S. government publishes data or shows evidence that, no, there actually was some fraud in the 2020 election? I think that would have a seismic impact on really just the future of the country and the future of politics. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the president that is going to be sworn in on January 20th and his cabinet and everyone that he's appointed, that group of people are probably, and this may be a negative or pessimistic forecast of our government going forward, is probably the last bastion of hope to uncover a lot of those secrets. We have a society in a large part, and I think a lot of this is just a loud minority speaking, that wants to rewrite history and expose all sorts of issues, some of which are obvious, but others are narrative and made up storylines from hundreds of years ago about the evils and the ills of the United States. But they don't want to go to matters that are more immediate, that there's more there are more facts, more evidence, more documentation. All those things are available to us to go into a deep investigation to find out the truth. And yes, we need to know the truth. We should know the truth, and that's really at the basis of our complete existence of starting this country, is truth and freedom, even if it doesn't feel good, doesn't look comfortable, and would call into question, kind of sacred cows from the past.
Yeah, isn't it amazing when you think about that and you realize that, like, what's happening currently is that there are government agencies that are withholding information from the public to safeguard their own reputation, but the government is literally, it should be by the people and for the people. This is something that we pay for. You and I, Mark, us taxpayers, we fund the government, right? It's not some corporation that we have a monthly subscription to, Netflix, and they don't want to show us what they've done because they would lose our business. This is our government. We own this. We pay for it. So you have no right to conceal any information that we should know about. And I think this is a fundamental ideological change that is coming on January 20th. And yeah, I would agree with you. I think the fact that, say what you want about Donald Trump, but the fact that a man who is clearly not controlled was able to ascend to the presidency, survived an assassination attempt by about 0.5 millimeter. Yeah, I think he probably is the last bastion for somebody who's going to come in and actually have a chance to expose this information. Now, does that mean it's going to happen? It still could not happen because, as you and I both know, probably, there are even more than we even understand behind the scenes, some powerful people and some things at play that would maybe prevent some of this information from coming out, which I would actually throw out there. The fact that Trump didn't release the JFK files this first term was interesting because he campaigned on that promise, and then he was asked about it later, and he said, actually, to Judge Napolitano, I think, from Fox News, he was asked about it, and he said, "Judge, if they showed you what they showed me, you wouldn't have released it either."
Mm.
And so he decided not to the first time, which was strange. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Mark, before we get to our last segment here.
Well, my thoughts is that unfortunately, the more we find out about historical figures from the past, and I'm thinking most specifically about tapes that we've heard from the Oval Office from past presidents' tenures. We usually find out more negative than leads us to a positive perception of these people, but it is the truth. And again, our nation is founded on truth and freedom. And even though it would be an ugly process, and I would hear a lot of things, be exposed to a lot of things that I wish weren't true, because I would like to believe that our government is not corrupt and is working on our behalf. We already know better. We already know that to a large part that's not been the case. So it would actually, in the long run, it's like a lot of people coming to a place of public disgrace, that in the long run, if they take positive measures and free themselves from their past mistakes and sins, then they become better people. They're better respected, and it would show that actually our democracy or republic is functioning correctly, is what the end result would be. We should actually
Yeah.
take some level of pride in that, even though it would be painful and it would not be comfortable.
Yeah, and I think some of the concern from President Trump the first term, for example, with the JFK files, is that and understandably, you wouldn't want to put out on the world stage that supposedly one of the most upright institutions in the world, the U.S. intelligence agencies, could ever do such a thing, such as have a hand in killing a president. I mean, that is, what worst action could you take as a U.S. government agency other than kill a president and get away with it? I mean, that would be damaging on the world stage to our reputation in some sense, but also it's been 60 years. And so I think it's the right thing to do to expose that information. But the last story for today, Mark, is one that's, again, is a head scratcher. And oftentimes some of these stories that arise from the left, I would say, make you scratch your head. And you have to wonder behind the scenes, who's making these decisions to do these things? You would think some people would have more of an ability to predict how the public would perceive things, because now we have the FDA coming out and saying that they're looking at banning food dyes just, 5 weeks before the inauguration. Magically, it's been 30 years since we've had these food dyes, and now all of a sudden they have the data. They have it on hand right now. So what's going on here?
Well, I've got to go directly to the political game that's probably being played. It reminds me of the border security issue when Joe Biden took office and on day one rescinded all the executive orders from President Trump. And then later, of course, this past spring and summer, of course, the power play by the left was, we have all this great border security legislation ready to pass, and Trump's influence on the GOP is holding this back. And we're the ones trying to get the border under control, and the GOP is standing in our way, when no, it was 3.5 years ago when all of this was in place, being enforced and improving along the border, and you rescinded it all. So don't play that political game, especially when you've baked in a lot of other DEI and other liberal agenda points into that legislation to get that through at the same time. So that was the game that was played with that. The game that was played with COVID in particular, among many, was, regardless of what my own personal thoughts are concerning the vaccine, I was not vaccinated, I will say that. So you probably have a pretty good sense of where I stand on that. But that Trump did put this warp speed effort into effect, got a vaccine, got it done by December, based on what I remember and based on what I've looked up here recently. And once Biden then won the election, of course, he credited Trump with all of that, and because he had already won the election. So after it was, the vote was decided,
after it was convenient,
then
yes.
Biden's giving credit to, okay, yeah, he did a nice job. I went back and looked up some articles where he gave some praise and conceded there to a certain extent. But then obviously once Biden got into his presidency, and then certainly the campaign got rolling toward the 2024 vote, then that was politicized again, and Biden denied that ever being an issue, and actually completely flat out lied about when the vaccine was released and available to the public, and sold it as his brainchild and as his service to the American people. And this seems to be, based on what the timing is going to be, if they get this through, going to be a similar ploy right here.
It's almost like the FDA is metaphorically saying, "Oh crap, we know that the data is going to come out showing that these food dyes are carcinogenic, contribute to things like ADHD and maybe I don't know, maybe things like autism. Who knows, right? We've seen a spike in autism, so it's almost like they're coming out and trying to cover cover themselves for what's going to be coming in the next few months. And interestingly, I should have brought it over here to have as a prop for the show, but in Thailand, right, one of the first things we did when we got here, my wife and I, because we known about all this toxic, all the toxic ingredients in the United States, we were like, I wonder if it's the same over here. So what we bought Fruit Loops, and guess what? In Thailand, Fruit Loops uses carrot juice to color their Fruit Loops orange. They use beet juice to color them red, right? They use actual food ingredients. And I've seen in this article from the New York Post that Kellogg's is coming out and saying, no, look, we stand by our decision to use food dyes in the U.S. Why is it just the U.S.? Why? I mean, I was in the airport in Canada on the way to Thailand, and guess what? In Canada, they don't have the food dyes. So it's almost like the U.S. is like this guinea pig for these food dyes, and clearly it's not economically expedient, because in Thailand we have normal food ingredients. So maybe for final remarks or a conclusion for today's show, Mark, why is the U.S. the guinea pig?
And just for clarification, all of these products produced by Kellogg's.
Yes, the same products. Yes.
Okay, same exact product. Okay. I can't really answer that, because you would think that if there was going to be inequity in this world based on power and money, then we, as the United States, would be the ones using the other countries as guinea pigs, which would not be right, but you would understand.
Which is what we're told in history, right? That we always do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and apparently that's not the case. Apparently we are the guinea pigs, because and look, this is also a problem with our healthcare industry, that we spend the most on healthcare, and we have like the 45th worst outcomes, and it is a money gamut. It is. It's lobbying. It's a deep seated issue in our country. But again, I really hope that what happens after January 20th, again, Lord willing, Donald Trump makes it to the 20th and he makes it through his presidency. We all need to be praying for that. Let's be real. Right. I'm not just saying that to be exaggeratory or anything. He's had 2 assassination attempts. We need to pray for our president, but Lord willing, he makes it through. Hopefully we will see a historic amount of data and information published that the government has on hand to show Americans why these decisions were made. I tend to believe that it's probably a money thing and lobbying at the end of the day. Hopefully it's not just nefarious actors knowingly doing this to Americans. I think it's a money thing, but regardless, we need to know why this has happened. So, as always, appreciate you, Mark. Great conversation. Follow Mark at The Voice of College Football. And also, he has a channel, The Word by Word, on YouTube. I think he's going to be working on that. But regardless, I know Mark is a man of faith, somebody that you want to check out and follow. A great product, again, with college football. And a lot of our listeners are, I would say, crossover listeners, right? A lot of our listeners love college football, including myself. So make sure you check him out. But as always, appreciate you, Mark.
Joe, appreciate you giving me this opportunity to talk about these important issues, and we'll see you soon.
Alrighty. Well, if you guys enjoyed the show today, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on all our socials at Grab Your Gear, Instagram, and TikTok. Check out our YouTube channel. We have many types of content other than this show 3 times a week. And lastly, again, I've said it before, but we're coming at you Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays for the foreseeable future. So with that being said, we will see you next Tuesday. Take care.